This week's video is a bit of a different one. One of my electives is psychology, even though I'm a business student. And from week one, I just thought she was an incredibly sound lecturer. So I went up to her a couple of weeks ago and asked, did she want to do a bit of a Q&A for the YouTube channel, because I just thought it'd be interesting to get a lecturer's perspective on college life, what it's like dealing with students, what it's like studying psychology. Just thought it would be an interesting conversation. So this week's video is a bit of a sit back, relax, enjoy the interview. Myself and Brian are going to go down to, we're going to go to UCD now, into her office, and do some stuff.
21st century, doing something mean to it. Do it better than anybody you ever seen. Do it straight from the
Dollars with the Newman building. These are like some lifts behind the library. Brian, quick dance. I just hope Cleaner doesn't have like a tiny office. So yes, do you want to give a little bit of background about yourself and like, I guess what you do here in UCD? And
okay.
Yeah.
So when I was in college, I went to Mary I in Limerick and did primary teaching and psychology, and went teaching for a year after that. I liked it, but I wanted to get back to the university thing. So went back and did a PhD in psychology, and now I'm specialising in mental health research. So working on a national study of mental health and also lecturing. You guys.
And like, how much of your time would, obviously from a student's perspective, you only see, you know, the lecture during the week. How much of your time is spent on research versus preparing for these classes?
I was asked recently how many hours I work a week, and I was like, on my contract or in reality? I don't know how to answer that. Like, each week is different.
Right. But in terms of your split between classwork and research work, is it 50-50 or more research, or it depends?
It's meant to be more research, so I should probably say more research.
Why is mental illness becoming an issue with the youth today, or has it been prevalent previously and we've chosen to ignore it?
Okay, so first of all, that it is increasing across the globe, that it's not just Ireland, and that, you know, this is something that's going on. And there are a couple of reasons as to why this could be going on. I think maybe lifestyle, that we're expecting a lot of ourselves and of each other. Maybe we're spending too much time doing things that aren't good for our mental health. So I hear a lot about like, oh, social media is bad for your mental health. Not necessarily. Social media there is research to suggest that like spending a lot of time online can be bad for your mental health. But in saying that, doing too much of anything is bad for your mental health. Going to the gym too much, spending too much time exercising, spending too much time with your friends, all of those things that are actually good for your mental health, if you do too much of them, they're bad for your mental health. And then there's all this research to say that like, if you're spending time on, say, social media, or if you're spending time drinking too much alcohol, doing too many drugs, that maybe you're not doing things that are better for your mental health. So it's not necessarily that all of those things are bad for your mental health, that like, you know, going out on a night out, that's not bad for your mental health, but doing too much of it is bad for your mental health, because it just means you're not doing other things. I do think it's a really, really complex issue that I can't say
like black and white.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What's good and bad. But I do think that we just need to be aware that there are things that we're doing that we're doing too much of it.
Yeah.
And it's the same, even like the pressure with college, the pressure with work, the pressure with finances, and you're constantly being monitored, and you know, we just need to give each other a break sometimes, no?
A book you'd recommend to someone who doesn't study psychology?
Oh, cool.
Like presumably a psychology book.
Yeah. Well, okay, if you're into autobiographies, I love Amy Poehler's book, but that's not really related to psychology.
Right.
Okay, psychology related. I think anything written by Oliver Sacks. He's he died a couple of years ago, but he used to work with people with rare psychological disorders. So like all of the chapters in his book, each chapter is a specific case study on somebody who had some sort of rare psycho or neurological disorder. So it's a really cool book. You learn a bit about the brain, a bit about psychology, and it's just really interesting. So yeah, I'd say that. Yeah.
And then Influence, that's a great one as well. I read that when I was like 16.
Oh really?
It's
Yeah.
such a good book.
Yeah. I would be wary of some of the pop psychology books. Just
Really?
'cause
They're not true?
no, not that they're not true, but just that I feel like some people, I think when you're looking at a psychology book, look at the author and see their credentials. Yeah, because I think some people might be just trying to grab some money based on their personal experience, which is fine if that's what you're into, if that's what you're looking for. But if you're looking for solid like information, then just make
like anecdotal.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love that. That was a good answer. What's the most fascinating thing about the brain? That's a very generic question.
Yeah, it is. But I would say that it's constantly changing depending on what we're doing in our environment. I think there's this idea out there that maybe once you hit the age of like 25, your brain just stops.
Yeah.
But if you were to, like the brain is we call it neuroplasticity. It's like the brain is plastic and we can constantly, like Play-Doh or something, we can constantly mold it to what we are doing. So like, you know, that you might have heard of that classic study with the London taxi drivers, and so there's a part of their brain that's related to spatial navigation that's particularly large in comparison to other people because they're always using that part. So I suppose the idea there is just like, depending on what you're doing, you can shape your brain. I think that's so cool.
Yeah. Even from my perspective, like, people obviously would say, oh, you're so creative. And then I always would say it's a muscle and you're able to sort of use it at will the more you use it. Like, would you know from a brain perspective, like if there's parts of your brain that you don't use, such as, I don't know, creativity, do those parts die off or do they stay or do they just shrink?
Good question. I wouldn't say that they'd die off or anything, but it's kind of like, it's not just about the structure of the brain, but it's also about the pathways. So if you imagine the brain as like the map of Ireland, and if you're traveling down certain roads, if you're always going between Dublin and Cork, that road is pretty much well worn. So that pathway in your brain is well worn. But it doesn't mean that the pathway between Dublin and Galway isn't there. It's just that you don't really travel it as much, so it's not really used as much, and it's not as automatic as, you know, you're not going to, when you're driving it for the first time, you mightn't really know where you're going. Does that make sense? Kind of?
Yeah.
That like it's still there, but you kind of need to practice it and you need to develop the strength of that pathway. Kind of?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I feel like I'm in a lecture now and it's like, guys, does this make sense?
Yeah, sorry.
Just I'm seeing some faces here.
I'm like, please, just give me some feedback.
What do you think the education system does to young people's health?
That's a big question.
It is a big question. You can tackle it whatever way you want.
You see, I was a teacher, and I feel that a lot of people blame teachers for what's going on, when actually the education system is a microcosm, or it's just like a smaller world within our world, that it only reflects the greater society, that it's not the cause of anything, it's synonymous, and we can't actually separate them out, I think. That's coming from my biased teacher's perspective, where I'm like, why is everybody blaming us for everything that's wrong with the world? We're trying to do our best here, you know. Yeah. But okay, so...
But I guess I'd wonder, would people say that because when you try and go back to the root cause of what problems are, people for some reason think education, and then therefore who are the instigators of education? The teachers, I guess. Yeah.
Oh, totally. Like, I can totally understand how you would, but I am definitely biased in answering this question.
Okay, no, that's fine. Like, yeah.
What was the main question again?
What do you think the education system does to young people's health?
Okay.
It's quite a generic question.
So depending... that's so broad. I don't even know how to answer.
Almost too broad, isn't it?
Maybe a bit, but like I feel like there's a lot of teaching about, but maybe not a lot of teaching through. So like there's a lot of, when I was teaching children about recycling, but I wasn't teaching them how to recycle. I was teaching them about it, like what you should do at home, but I wasn't actually like actively out there in their homes with them, you know, that kind of way. So like I feel like a lot of it is quite passive, that we're teaching about, but we're not teaching through.
Yeah,
and maybe it's the same with exercise. I don't understand why the government recommends that young people under 18 should be exercising for 60 minutes a day, yet there's only 60 minutes a week in their curriculum. I don't get it, you know? So
like you should reflect what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But like we shouldn't be telling young people, oh, you should be exercising every day, but not giving them time to do it. Do you know?
This is an interesting one. Why did you Why did you become a psychology lecturer and not go into the psychology profession?
Oh, great question. And I have a good answer to this.
Humdinger of a question.
Because when I was teaching for the year, I was very, I am very sensitive, and I was working with a young person who needed a lot of help. So I was spending a lot of my time in the evenings, like taking him out of homework club, going through a few different things with him, just trying to make him feel better about what was going on, when I should have been spending time planning and assessing. And but at the same time, I found it incredibly stressful myself, that I found it like it really impacted on my life, trying to support somebody else. So I was really interested in mental health. I was really interested in psychology, but just working with patients, I wanted to contribute, but I wasn't at a stage where I felt like not insensitive, but just strong enough to be able to hear people's problems and not take them home with me. Right. Does that make sense? So I just thought maybe if I go off, study psychology, study mental health, maybe I just need to get to a certain stage in life where I would be able to separate out the two. But then I just sort of fell into this and I love it. And yeah.
When should someone see a psychologist?
Whoa, also a good question.
Humdinger.
This is hard for me to answer because it depends on so many different factors. Yeah, where if you're in college, so a lot of your viewers are in college, I assume. There are supports in college, so that does make it a bit easier, where you can go to a counsellor on campus. Well, you can put your name on a list to go to a counsellor on campus. Whereas,
is that free of charge, or I've never looked into it?
I think so. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah. The only thing is that if you're outside college, then you might have to go pay for it. Do you know? If you're to get it for free, you have to wait a long while to get it. So if you're in college, I would say if you're experiencing difficulties, go to a student advisor or the counsellor, or even the doctor on campus, and tell them what's going on, because they'll be able to guide you in the right direction. Yeah.
But I guess the question is when. And I guess that's more a question of self-awareness than how do you know when it's the right time to ask for help?
It totally depends. And that's why I would say I know of somebody who went to their GP and they didn't even realise that they were going through so much. It was only when it wasn't even the GP, it was the college doctor here. So they went to the doctor here, and they were saying they just went for something completely unrelated to their psychological well-being, and they were just saying, oh yeah, this is a bit stressful, that's a bit stressful, that's a bit stressful. And it was the doctor then who was saying, I think you need to see someone now. Do you know? So I think maybe just going to someone, laying out the facts, maybe they'll be able to guide you. Does that make sense? Yeah. I don't know. It's hard to say because it totally depends on the person.
Yeah. So I actually went to a psychologist for 10 months, and it was outside of, I think the big thing is actually the financial factor. Even when I said that on the YouTube channel, people were like, how much does yours cost? Yeah. And honestly, mine was €100 every 2 weeks, which I know sounds crazy, but it's actually probably not uncommon. And even though it was helpful, I was questioning it every other week. I was like, €200 a fucking month, that I could be spending on rent, I know. So it's hard to
I would say though that say when it comes to the gym, right, I pay €70 a month for the gym a month, which seems like a lot, as in when you're like, oh, €70 would get me a long way. But I could go over to Dundrum and spend that on a coat that I don't really need, or a bag that I don't really need, or I could go on a night out and spend it in, going to the gym is actually really good for your mental health. So in the same way, going to a psychologist or going to a counsellor, it might actually be worth it if, you could end up spending your money in, on Camille on a Friday and Saturday night. Or
Camille is great.
I know, yeah. That is money well spent.
But yeah, I guess if you really feel like you need it, you're probably going to have to make the responsible decision to be like, I actually can't go on that night out this week because this is more important.
Oh, Jigsaw is actually really good as well. Sorry.
What's that?
We just, I do kind of work with Jigsaw, but
yeah.
So Jigsaw is, have you ever heard of Jigsaw?
No, never.
It's a mental health charity. And there's a drop-in service that if you're between the ages of 12 and 25, you can just drop in and see someone for, I think it's a maximum of 8 visits.
It's amazing.
Yeah, no, it's really good. So
And are they like mobile, or are they?
No. They're just, I think there's about 15 of them. Or maybe there's 13 now, and there will be 15 around the country. So
amazing.
Google it, see if there's some
Cool.
around. Oh, and there's also Jigsaw Online. So they have an online thing. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
like online consultations or something?
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
There's a bit of practical advice.
But for those people who are just going through, if you're going through like a breakup or a stressful time, and it's not necessarily something you think is clinical depression or clinical anxiety, something like that, where it's like just a couple of visits to help you get through it, that's where Jigsaw is really good.
Yeah, because like that's the reason why I went to psychologist. And even when I was going, it was like there's not enough said about, like, everybody talks about when you're depressed you should go, but nobody talks about when like you didn't get a job or you broke up with a girl, or these ones, as you said, that you actually just need a bridge back. What are the job opportunities like for someone with a psychology degree?
A hard question to answer, because the psychology degree is quite broad. You come out with skills in statistics, but you also come out with like skills in, or knowledge about psychology, about social dynamics. So there are so many different things you could go into. You could go into research, you could go into we have graduates who work with Twitter, Facebook. Where else do they work? HR, consultancy, so things like Accenture and those sort of things. And then we have graduates who go on and do clinical psychology, and then like the more traditional psychology routes, so counselling, clinical psychology, educational psychology. So there really is loads you could do. It's really hard to say. I think one of the main things that people don't necessarily think about is that it sets you up to problem solve, and it sets you up to be
critical thinker.
A critical thinker, yeah. And that a lot of jobs need that. It's so broad, it's really hard to say. But at the same time, you come out with a lot. It's kind of like asking someone, like, if you have a general engineering degree, what could you do? And there's so many different things you could do with that. Or even like a commerce degree. There's so many things you could go and do with it that it's kind of hard to say.
I think probably from a student's perspective, it's like, geez, well, if I'm going to be putting 4 years into this and my parents are paying good money for it, then I sure goddamn hope I'm getting a job at the end of it. And I think that's where the question comes from.
You definitely get a job. You wouldn't necessarily get a job as a psychologist because you need to go on and do further training. But you would, like, the employment opportunities are, I think psychology graduates are really highly valued. I would also suggest that if you're in college, just go to your career advisors. As not even if you, sometimes I've gone to career advisors in the past when it's actually too late, in that I've gone when I'm like, hey, I want to apply for this job, will you help me work on my CV? And they're like, okay, if you'd come to us a couple of weeks ago or even a couple of months ago, we could have told you that you need to get certain experience, and also that we need to fix up your CV a lot. So you're actually better off going before, so to find out what is it you need to get for your CV. And the same when it comes to interviews. I went before where I was like, oh, I have an interview next week, will you help me practice? And they're just like, we can't, like, it's really hard to help you at this point, it's kind of a bit late. So just to make the most of it and maybe get your career advisor and see, like, try and decide what it is you'd like to do. If it is, say, if you want to end up in forensic psychology or something, maybe they'll give you the push to get an internship with, I don't know, the prison, I don't know, or whatever. Do you know that, like, they'll kind of make you think about what it is you need to get outside of your degree to help you get on that path?
This is Paddy, who's always in the vlog. He says, man, I'd love to know how many people actually have clinical depression or clinical anxiety. I think a lot of people say they get anxious or depressed based on their lack of effort in doing something about it.
Okay, I understand the question, I think, in that people use anxiety and depression quite flippantly. They'll be like, oh, I'm depressed, or...
Which is like the other side of being so much discourse about mental health, is that there's probably a lot of erroneous labeling. There are more claims being taken out for health insurance for mental health. So that's like you could only do that if you're diagnosed with clinical anxiety and depression. But
in
Like,
general.
how do you get diagnosed as that?
You'd go to it's so many different ways.
Do you do a test? Oh, it's not one
so
answer.
Well, there'd be clinical tests, so it's kind of like a standardized interview almost. There's no necessarily like biomarker for depression or anxiety. They're not going to take your blood and be like, oh yeah, that's definitely depression, or that it's based on a set amount of questions and factors and things like that your doctor would do. So even like your therapist or your counsellor can't necessarily diagnose it, but they can help you with feelings of anxiety and depression. So there are differences between actual diagnosis and experiencing feelings of depression and anxiety.
Are there any aspects of the course a lot of students struggle to understand and get a grasp of, and why do you think that? I guess, do you want to relate it to what we're doing, Intro to Psychology? Is this a first year module? Why did I look at that camera?
It's a stage 1 module, so it's
okay.
It's for like first year psychology students can do it, but like at the same time there are a couple of second years in there, and it's an elective.
People like me. Oh yeah.
So it's stage 1, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's first year. Yeah.
Yes.
What was the question?
Is there any aspects of the course that people find hard to understand? How long have you been teaching it? This course?
This course? Oh, when we started in September.
Oh my God, we're your little babies.
Well, like, I lectured on the module last year, just a couple of lectures, but I took it over this semester. I don't know. Is there something you probably know better than I do?
I find it all pretty grand, but we haven't done the final exam yet, have we?
Yeah.
We just did the midterm. We did the midterm there during the week, and it was good.
It was kind of hard.
Yeah, sort of. I actually, as a side note, I loved all the stuff about the brain. Okay. That was brilliant.
There's more of that coming up, so that's good.
That was actually so interesting. Yeah.
I think a module like that, where sometimes, like for a lot of you, it's your first time hearing about things, you're like, whoa, that is so cool. I always thought that. I remember in college myself, my friend just saying, psychology is like common sense with fancy words. We're like, I can see it though when I'm lecturing. I say something about everyday life and you're all just like, yeah, I totally get that. And I'm just putting a fancy label on it.
Why do you think porn is the most popular content on the internet? And how does watching porn affect a person's psychology?
Okay, so...
And one random other thing. Is there any stats around, do more girls than guys watch it? Or sorry, I was thinking the other way around. More guys than girls.
So actually, we have the My World survey coming out next week, and we report on this.
Oh my God, amazing.
But in pornography research, they say that you should always look at sex drive. That like, okay, there are people telling you that you're not allowed to go out and have sex with everyone, and you can't have sex with people you're not in a committed relationship with. But then on the other hand, they're saying you can't watch pornography. So like if you have some sort of sexual drive or like sexual arousal, you have to be able to like hone that energy in some way. So it's like which is more acceptable, going out and having sex with loads of people, or like going out and having sex with people you're not committed to, or like watching pornography? Do you know? Like I don't know. I make it sound like it's like anyway.
Yeah. I always wonder this. I don't know if you studied it. Does watching a lot of pornography reduce like your not reduce your testosterone, but I would think like if you did it too much, would you find it hard to turn it on when you're actually in an intimate setting? To
be honest, I don't really know the answer to that. That's kind of a biological question, and I'm not entirely too sure. But I think we... just to come back to your first question, there are gender differences whereby way more males are watching pornography, which is than what I females. Thought, and that it does have an effect on body esteem. I think that there is some research to suggest that it affects self-esteem in both males and females. So watching too much of it can, be bad for your self-esteem, and then because you're looking at like idealized versions, and so maybe that I suppose it's complex, and maybe that could impact on your sex life then in real life.
Why? Like, is it just because I don't know, do guys have more testosterone? Well, they obviously have more testosterone. Like, why guys? Because I presume sex drive is similar.
I think there's a social thing there as well, whereby in society it's way more accepted for males to watch pornography than females. Yeah, and to even like, what's the word, embrace their sexuality or something. Like it's way more accepted amongst males.
That's a really funny way to end. Yeah, thanks so much. You said you have a report come. Oh, can you even talk about that?
Yeah. Yes, I can.
So you have a report coming out.
Yeah.
And what's that about, and where can people
it's
find
called
it?
My World Survey. You can go to myworldsurvey.ie and it'll be up there on the 19th of November.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Maybe you can share it.
Oh my god! Yeah. And what is it about?
So we look at what we call protective and risk factors for mental health. So we look at protective factors, what protects your mental health, and what's a risk factor, what is risky for your mental health. So we looked at about 19,000 young people between the ages of 12 and 25, and we asked them loads of different questions around sleep, exercise, social media use, all different lifestyle factors, and then things like depression, anxiety, resilience, social support, optimism, life satisfaction, you name it. We looked at them, and we were just looking at the relationships between all of these things. So looking at like the impact of not getting enough sleep on your mental health, maybe watching too much pornography and mental health, social media and all those sort of things. So yeah.
Cool, amazing.
Yeah,
You're brilliant.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Good work.
That was great. Apologies for the visuals not being ideal. There's not a lot of room in the office, unfortunately. So we had to do a really random setup. And then Cleena had to go off for a meeting. Brian, how your arms feel?
My arms are fine, my armpits.
I actually have a jam-packed day full of lectures, but I think that's enough. That's enough video for you guys. So we'll probably hop over to Paddy and Matt for the outro. Yeah, video's over, boys. So I guess any thoughts? I don't need your silly comedy this week.
Oh, what do you think about stashes?
Stashes of what?
Mustaches.
Oh my god, come next to each other. Let's rate them. Okay, now we know how to end the video. You guys have to rate below which you think has the better stash.
We don't touch kids as long as
century, doing something mean to it. Do it better than anybody you ever seen. Do it. Screams from the haze, got a nice ring to it. I guess every superhero